All right, so have you ever had one of those days where you think it's business as usual, you know,
Hmm.
and then it turns out to be anything but? Well, imagine that day ending with you getting assassinated by your closest colleagues.
Oh, wow.
That's precisely what happened to Julius Caesar on March 15th, 44 BC,
Right.
a date that would forever be known as the Ides of
Ah.
March.
Yeah, it's incredible how this event from over 2,000 years ago still has the power to, just fascinate
It
us.
really does. And you wanted us to take a deep dive into the assassination of Julius Caesar.
I did.
And we've got a fantastic mix of sources to help us do just that. We'll
Yeah.
be looking at a podcast episode by historian Tristan Hughes.
Great source.
Plus, we'll be pulling in some expert commentary from doctors Emma Southern and Steelbrand.
All right, so before we get into the drama,
Okay.
let's set the stage a little bit.
Yeah.
Just who was Julius Caesar?
Right.
And why was Rome teetering on the edge of chaos?
Okay, so let's rewind to 44 BC.
Okay.
Julius Caesar is essentially the top dog in Rome.
Yeah.
He's a brilliant military strategist,
Mm.
very savvy politician,
Yes.
reformed the calendar,
Right.
and he's been showered with honors like no one before him.
Yeah.
You could say he was living the Roman dream.
Hughes makes a really interesting point about Caesar's status, though.
Okay.
He wasn't merely powerful, he was practically worshipped.
Wow.
There were temples dedicated to him, statues placed among the gods,
Really?
and he even got to sport those red boots,
Yeah.
a potent symbol of kingship in Roman culture.
Right, but here's the catch.
Yeah,
Rome was supposed to be a republic, not a monarchy.
exactly.
And a lot of senators were not happy with Caesar's growing power,
Right.
to say the least.
Of course.
They saw him as dismantling their entire way of life.
That fear of Caesar becoming a dictator was very real.
Mm-hmm.
Hughes talks about these Rex incidents
Okay.
where people actually hailed Caesar as a king.
Really?
Imagine the tension in the air.
Wow.
There's even that dramatic scene at the Lupercalia Festival
Oh, okay.
where Mark Antony, yes, that Mark Antony offered Caesar a crown.
Whoa, talk about adding fuel to the fire. A crown?
Yeah,
That's a pretty bold move, even for Mark Antony.
it is.
So how did all this simmering resentment actually transform
Right.
into a full-blown conspiracy?
Yeah.
Who were the masterminds behind Caesar's assassination?
Well, Hughes zeroes in on three main conspirators.
Okay.
Decimus Brutus, Marcus Brutus, and Cassius.
Okay.
Each of them had a different relationship with Caesar,
Got it.
which makes their motives all the more complex.
Okay, let's unpack that a bit.
Okay.
Decimus Brutus was a close friend and military ally to Caesar,
Right.
almost like a brother.
Yeah.
Then you've got Marcus Brutus, the conflicted idealist,
Yeah.
with some even believing he was Caesar's illegitimate son.
Interesting.
And finally, there's Cassius,
Right.
the fiery, experienced soldier with a history of opposing tyranny.
Yeah. Talk about a mixed bag.
So what's fascinating is that each conspirator had their own blend of reasons for wanting Caesar out of the picture.
Exactly.
Some were genuinely afraid he'd declare himself king.
Of course, especially after those Rex incidents we talked about.
Right.
Others were deeply worried about preserving the traditional Roman Republic,
Right.
seeing Caesar as a threat to their way of life.
And let's be honest, we can't rule out good old-fashioned ambition.
Right. We can.
Some of them probably saw Caesar's removal as a chance to climb the Roman power ladder themselves.
Hughes doesn't shy away from that possibility at all.
Yeah.
He brings up several instances that show Caesar's growing arrogance and how it fueled the anxieties of those around him.
Okay.
Remember that episode where a group of senators excitedly presented Caesar with a bunch of new honors?
Yeah.
Caesar barely even acknowledged them.
Oh, wow.
He didn't even bother to stand up,
Really?
which was a huge insult in Roman culture.
So it's like he was practically begging them to challenge him, right?
It seems that way.
But if these senators were so upset, why wait until the Ides of March to make their move?
Well, this is where those famous omens and warnings come into play. Apparently, the Ides of March were preceded by a whole bunch of bad omens, vivid dreams, failed animal sacrifices, even a chilling inscription unearthed from a tomb that seemed to foretell the death of a great leader.
Hold on, are you telling me they had a literal warning inscription about a leader's death?
They did.
And they still decided to go ahead with it?
Yeah.
What were they thinking?
You have to remember the Romans were incredibly superstitious.
Okay.
They truly believed in the power of omens and fate.
I see.
But the crucial thing here is that Caesar chose to ignore all these signs.
Really?
mainly because Decimus Brutus managed to convince him that his good luck would outweigh any bad omens.
Decimus was quite the smooth operator, wasn't he?
He was.
Preying on Caesar's pride like that.
Yeah, and Caesar being Caesar totally bought it.
So tell me about Decimus Brutus.
Well, remember, Decimus Brutus was secretly one of the conspirators.
Right.
This misplaced trust in Decimus proved to be Caesar's fatal flaw.
Wow.
Hughes really emphasizes how Decimus was the key to the whole plot. His betrayal, a crucial element in Caesar's downfall.
Talk about a backstabbing friend, literally.
Yeah.
So walk us through that fateful day.
Okay.
How did the assassination actually go down?
It all happened at the Theater of Pompey,
Yeah.
where the Senate was meeting temporarily because their usual building had burned down.
Oh, wow.
Caesar arrived, seemingly brushing off all those warnings,
Right.
and headed straight for his golden chair.
Talk about a sitting duck.
But I bet it wasn't as simple as just strolling in and attacking him, right?
Yeah.
Hughes mentions all these near misses and close calls leading up to the assassination.
Give me an example.
Absolutely. There's that chilling encounter with the Senator Popilius Lena,
Okay.
who apparently knew about the plot but didn't expose it.
Oh, wow.
Can you imagine the tension for the conspirators watching their plan almost fall apart right before their eyes?
Yeah, then you've got the famous soothsayer, Spirina,
Yes.
who had already warned Caesar about the Ides of March.
Right? Some accounts even say that Caesar saw him that day and joked, "Hey, the Ides of March have come and I'm still alive."
Wow.
But Spirina's response was even more chilling.
What did he say?
"Aye, but they are not yet gone."
Oh, my gosh. Talk about foreshadowing.
This moment actually inspired Shakespeare's famous line, "Beware the Ides of March."
So, okay, everyone's in position. The tension is building. Who strikes the first blow?
It was a senator named Tullius Cimber,
Okay.
whose brother had been exiled by Caesar.
Right.
He approached Caesar, pretending to plead for his brother's return,
Okay.
and then bam, he grabbed Caesar's toga.
Oh, wow.
This was the prearranged signal for the attack to begin.
And then all hell broke loose.
Hughes paints this chaotic scene of senators drawing their daggers, Caesar being stabbed repeatedly, and everyone else fleeing in panic.
It's difficult to even fathom the level of chaos and violence that erupted.
I know there were so many attackers that they even ended up stabbing each other by accident.
Really?
One detail that really sticks out, though,
Yeah.
is where Caesar finally fell at the base of a statue of his old rival, Pompey.
Wow. You couldn't script it any better, could you?
You couldn't.
But here's the million-dollar question.
Okay.
Did Caesar really utter those famous last words? Et tu, Brute?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
And the answer is a bit more complicated than you might think.
Okay.
According to Hughes, none of the earliest historical accounts actually mention Caesar saying those exact words.
So Et tu, Brute is completely made up.
Not necessarily made up, but
yeah.
definitely embellished over time.
Got it.
Suetonius, a Roman historian who wrote about 150 years after the event,
Right.
claimed that Caesar said something similar in Greek.
Okay.
Kai su tenon, which translates to you too, my child.
Huh.
But even that account is debated by historians.
So those iconic last words might be more Hollywood than history.
Yeah,
That's kind of a bummer.
it is.
But regardless, Caesar is dead.
Yes.
What happened next?
Right.
Did the conspirators actually have a plan for what came after?
That's the irony of the whole thing.
What do you mean?
The conspirators, for all their planning, didn't seem to have a clear vision for a post-Caesar Rome.
Oh, wow.
They just assumed the Republic would magically restore itself, but that's not how things played out.
So instead of a glorious return to the Republic, they got what?
Anarchy,
Yeah.
pretty much. Dr. Southern describes it as a state of utter confusion.
Yeah.
Rome was left leaderless.
Right.
The people were in shock,
Of course.
and the conspirators were scrambling to maintain control.
That sounds like the perfect recipe for even more power struggles.
It does.
Who stepped into the void left by Caesar.
Two key figures emerged.
Okay.
Mark Antony Caesar's loyal right-hand man who barely escaped death himself,
Right.
and Marcus Aemilius Lepidus,
Yeah.
who held the important position of master of horse in Caesar's administration.
Okay.
They tried to stabilize the situation,
Mhm.
even meeting with the conspirators to negotiate some kind of peace.
But that couldn't have lasted long, really.
All right.
I mean, these are the guys who just orchestrated Caesar's murder.
The truce was fragile at best,
Yeah.
and lurking in the shadows was a young man named Octavian,
Right.
Caesar's adopted son,
Right.
who was about to inherit the mantle of power and set Rome on a path toward empire.
That's right. Octavian, the future Emperor Augustus.
Exactly.
So the assassination of Caesar didn't quite deliver the outcome the conspirators were hoping for, did it?
If anything, it accelerated the decline of the Republic and paved the way for the rise of the Roman Empire.
Wow.
Dr. Southern argues that Octavian actually learned from Caesar's mistakes.
Okay.
He saw how Caesar's blatant power grab had alienated the Senate and ultimately led to his downfall.
So Octavian took a more subtle, strategic approach to consolidating his power.
Right.
He knew how to play the game and manipulate the system to his advantage.
Exactly. He managed to amass immense power while still maintaining the facade of upholding Republican traditions.
What a twist.
Yeah.
So the Ides of March, this dramatic turning point in Roman history, was just the beginning of a much larger power struggle.
And that struggle would ultimately redefine Rome's destiny.
Wow.
But before we jump into the rise of Octavian and the birth of the Roman Empire, we need to cover one more crucial event from the Ides of March saga.
What's that?
Caesar's funeral.
Ooh, that's right. Caesar's funeral was a pivotal moment, wasn't it?
Absolutely. It was a powder keg of emotions and political maneuvering,
Wow.
setting the stage for the next chapter in Roman history.
Sounds like we've got a lot more to uncover.
We do. Welcome back to our deep dive into the Ides of March.
So we left off with the assassination itself.
Right.
And now we're moving on to what might be one of the most famous funerals in history. Caesar's...
It was.
Talk about a powder keg of emotions and political maneuvering.
Imagine Rome just days after the assassination.
Okay.
The city is a whirlwind of rumors. Anxieties are running high.
Yeah.
And the conspirators are holed up on Capitoline Hill, essentially fearing for their lives.
Wow. And in the middle of all this, they have to handle the absolute PR nightmare of Caesar's funeral. How did they even pull that off?
Well, this is where Mark Antony, Caesar's loyal lieutenant, takes center stage.
Okay.
He's in charge of the funeral arrangements, and he plays his cards masterfully.
This is where Antony's famous speech comes in, right?
Yes.
The one Shakespeare immortalized. Friends, Romans, countrymen, lend me your ears.
Exactly. But before we get to the speech itself, let's set the scene a little bit.
Yeah.
The funeral takes place in the Roman Forum, the heart of the city.
Okay.
A massive crowd gathers commoners, senators. Everyone wants to witness this historical moment.
I can picture it now. The tension, the anticipation.
Yeah.
It must have felt like the entire city was holding its breath.
Hughes really paints a vivid picture of the procession.
Okay.
Caesar's body, laid out on a gilded couch, is paraded through the forum.
Wow.
And to add to the drama, they actually displayed the blood-soaked toga he was wearing when he was murdered.
Wow. Talk about a powerful image.
It is.
That must have stirred up some intense emotions in the crowd.
Absolutely. Then comes Antony's turn to speak.
Okay.
He starts by reading Caesar's will, which cleverly leaves money and land to the Roman people.
Smart move. Appealing to their sense of gratitude?
Yeah.
Antony knew how to work a crowd.
He did, and then he launches into this incredibly moving eulogy, praising Caesar's achievements and reminding everyone of his generosity.
Right.
He even points out the stab wounds on Caesar's body,
Really?
emphasizing the brutality of the assassination.
Okay, so was this when he actually said, friends, Romans, countrymen, lend me your ears?
Well, Shakespeare's version is definitely more dramatic than what our historical sources suggest.
Right.
But the core message is the same.
Okay.
Antony skillfully uses his words to play on the crowd's emotions, turning them against the conspirators.
Right.
He even brought out a wax effigy of Caesar, showing all the stab wounds in graphic detail.
That's both gruesome and brilliant. It must have been incredibly effective.
Oh, incredibly.
Yeah.
The crowd was whipped into a frenzy. They started rioting, demanding revenge against the assassins.
So much for a peaceful funeral.
Yeah.
It seems like Caesar's death, instead of calming the political storm, actually made it worse.
That's a key takeaway here.
What is?
The assassination backfired spectacularly.
Oh,
Instead of restoring the Republic, it pushed Rome deeper into chaos and set the stage for a whole new power struggle.
And in the middle of all this is young Octavian, Caesar's heir, watching and learning.
Exactly.
He saw firsthand how Antony manipulated the crowd, how powerful symbols and rhetoric could be.
Dr. Southern points out that Octavian would internalize these lessons.
Okay.
He understood the power of public opinion and how to use it to his advantage.
Right.
He learned from Caesar's mistakes, choosing to avoid overt displays of power, and instead taking a more subtle strategic approach.
This is where Octavian really starts to come into his own, isn't it? He's not just Caesar's heir anymore. He's becoming a political force to be reckoned with.
Precisely. And this is where our deep dive into the Ides of March takes a turn.
Okay.
We've explored the events leading up to the assassination,
Right.
the chaos that followed, and the
Hmm.
pivotal role of Caesar's funeral in shaping public opinion.
But the story doesn't end there.
It doesn't.
The assassination of Caesar was just the prologue to a much larger story, the rise of Octavian and the birth of the Roman Empire.
And that, as they say, is a story for another deep dive.
Welcome back to the Deep Dive. We've been unraveling the story of Julius Caesar's assassination and the immediate fallout.
Right, we've seen how Caesar's ambition clashed with the fears of the conspirators leading to that fateful day on the Ides of March. We've explored the chaos and confusion that engulfed Rome afterwards, the power vacuum that threatened to tear the Republic apart.
And we left off with Caesar's dramatic funeral, expertly orchestrated by Mark Antony to turn public sentiment against those who had plotted against Caesar. So now let's shift our focus to the aftermath and the long-term consequences of Caesar's assassination. What became of the conspirators? Did they achieve their goal of restoring the Roman Republic?
From what we've talked about, it doesn't sound like things went according to plan.
No, not at all. In fact, Caesar's death triggered a chain of events that ultimately led to the demise of the Republic and the rise of the Roman Empire.
Right.
It's like that saying, the road to hell is paved with good intentions. Or maybe in this case, not so good intentions.
Exactly. The conspirators, despite their careful planning, failed to grasp the complexities of Roman politics. They underestimated the depth of Caesar's popularity with the common people and the ambition of those who would exploit his death for their own gain.
And that's where Octavian enters the picture, right?
Yeah.
Caesar's adopted son, the shrewd and ambitious young man who saw opportunity amidst the chaos.
Exactly. Octavian, who would later become known as Augustus, was a master strategist. He patiently waited for his moment, forging alliances and consolidating his power. He learned from Caesar's mistakes, avoiding any overt displays of tyranny, while skillfully manipulating the political system from within.
Dr. Southern describes Octavian as a master of public relations. He knew how to present himself as a defender of Roman traditions, even as he was dismantling the very foundations of the Republic.
Yeah, it's a fascinating case study in political maneuvering. Octavian managed to outwit his rivals, including Mark Antony, who initially seemed like the most likely successor to Caesar.
So the assassination of Caesar, instead of revitalizing the Republic, actually created the conditions for its downfall. It paved the way for a new kind of leader, the emperor, and a new era in Roman history.
That's the great irony of the Ides of March. The conspirators, driven by their fear of tyranny, unwittingly set in motion the events that would lead to the most enduring empire the world had ever seen.
What a twist. But what happened to the key players in this drama, the conspirators who set this chain of events in motion?
Well, their victory was short-lived. They were forced to flee Rome, pursued by the forces of Mark Antony and Octavian. Within a few years, they were defeated and killed in a series of battles.
So much for being heroes of the Republic. They ended up as casualties in the very power struggle they helped create.
It's a tragic but fitting end to their story. They failed to understand the true nature of power and the ambition that lurked in the hearts of men like Antony and Octavian.
This deep dive has been quite the journey. From the heights of Caesar's power to the chaos of his assassination and the unexpected consequences that followed.
Yeah, what's truly fascinating is how the Ides of March, the single event from ancient history, continues to resonate with us today. It raises timeless questions about the nature of power, the consequences of violence, and the delicate balance between ambition and the common good.
And it reminds us that even the best laid plans can go astray, and that history is often shaped by unintended consequences.
Right, and perhaps most importantly, it serves as a reminder to be wary of those who claim to act in the name of liberty while secretly pursuing their own agendas.
Well said. As we wrap up our deep dive into the Ides of March, I'm left pondering this question. What if Caesar had heeded those warnings? What if he had simply stayed home that day? Would the Republic have survived? Would the Roman Empire have ever come to be?
Those are questions that we can only speculate about. They highlight the fact that history is a complex tapestry woven from countless threads of choice, chance, and consequence. Perhaps in some alternate timeline, the Ides of March passed without incident, and Caesar lived to a ripe old age, leaving the Republic to grapple with its own internal contradictions.
That's a thought-provoking idea. Thanks for joining us on this exploration of Roman history. Remember, the Deep Dive is always here to guide you through the most captivating and thought-provoking corners of knowledge. Subscribe now and join us for our next Deep Dive.